Hello, it's 4:20. Let's get high. All right. Well, I wasn't going to speak about it, but my friend Elon sent me a message and asked me that I should speak a little about Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, the promised land. This land was promised to Abraham 4,000 years ago, and there's a reason why this little strip of land is such an important piece of the whole puzzle. Because everything is in the form of the tree of life, and the tree of life is in the form of a human being, and we know that that every person is a small world, and therefore the world is a big human being, and you can you can see it in how the 7 continents fit together in the human body, with Eurasia being the torso, the chest, and the Arctic being the head, and Scandinavian countries being the lobes of the brain, and China like China and India being like the abdomen, and Japan and England being the hands, and the arms are sunken into the water, and Africa and South America are the legs, and because it's Mother Earth, and Canada is the back, makes America the buttocks, with the Mississippi running right down the middle. Entering in, anyways, we don't have to get too specific. Anyways, and since it's Mother Earth, Australia, New Zealand are the ovaries, and the Mediterranean is the sex of Mother Earth, and right at the end of that is the land of Israel, and the land of Israel is a place of conception. This is where the first human being was conceived, was gathered together by all the dust of the earth, and put in the place where a few thousand years later the temple would be built. And God had a special place where God wanted the temple built. God knew in the future there would be a temple, and God already had a place mapped out for it. What was so special about this place? Because a story had happened in this place where 2 brothers lived on a, each like sort of on a mountaintop, and there was the valley below. And one brother was blessed with many, many children. And he didn't have, obviously, like a lot of money or resources. And the other brother, he didn't have children, but he was a good businessman. He made lots of money. And so one night, in the middle of the night, each brother woke up, and the brother with the children thought, it's not fair. I have all these beautiful children, and I also have, some wealth, maybe not like my brother, but, he doesn't have any children. I should take all my wealth and give it to my brother, so he'll have the wealth. I'll have the children. So he packs up his little carriage and goes down the valley to bring his wealth to his brother. At the same time, the other brother woke up, and he said, it's not fair. I have all this wealth. My brother has all these children. What do I need the wealth for? He needs the wealth. So he packed up like his wealth and put it in the carriage and went down. And in the moonlight, they saw each other. And they understood the intention in each other's heart. And they ran to each other and kissed each other. And God said, that's where I want my temple built. This story has a lot to say about modern Israel. And because not only is it a place of conception, it is the Holy Land. It is the place where the light of God was able to radiate into the world. And there's a prediction in the Zohar that in the end of days, that the tribe of Reuben. Reuben, he was the firstborn of the 12 sons of Yaakov. And he was supposed to be the firstborn, and he was supposed to be the king, and he lost both of these. Because he has a nature which is not really good for leadership. He gets very excited, and he can like really get everyone all excited, and he's considered like troubled waters. And so because of that, he lost both the kingship, he lost the kahuna, all things were supposed to be to the firstborn, and he didn't get them. Even when the Jewish people came back after 40 years in the desert to take the land from the Canaanites, that Reuben said, he wants to stay, in Greece. He liked it in Greece. There were a lot of like good places for cattle, and so he didn't even come to the land. And Reuben, he goes back, to the tribe. Reuben goes back to the original son Reuben, who, when Yaakov had 2 wives, and these 2 wives had 2 lovers, 2 female lovers. And as a result, there were 4 mothers to the 12 children. And even though Leah, who was Reuben's mother, had 6 of the 12 boys, Rachel, Yaakov always slept with Rachel. He liked Rachel. And when Rachel passed away, he moved in with Rachel's lover instead of Leah. And Reuben was so upset that he went into Yaakov's tent and he messed up his bed, as if to say, I slept with your wife. And not a good thing to do. Even though he didn't do really anything, but he was upset. So it says that this is a sign that in the future, the tribe of Reuben is going to come back from around the world, and they're going to come to Israel, and they're going to terrorize the world, and they're going to win. But they're not going to stay because they didn't come for the right reason. And that is certainly true in Israel today. It's wonderful to live in the land of Israel. I lived there for 10 years in Sfat before there were computers. And it was really like an outlier, on the border. Very cool place, very spiritual, very just full of ancient graves, and they say that the air of Sfat makes you smart. Anyways, but before Rome destroyed Israel and sent everyone out into exile, there was already a problem brewing among the Jews, which is that there's something called the Saduki. And the Saduki were a group of underground hidden people who were trying to usurp the Jewish tradition, which had been based on a king. But since we came back from Babylon, there weren't any kings, and there was Greece, and then there was Rome. And so in a sense, it was a very difficult time, this time of the Second Temple. And forgot what I was saying. Yes. the Sadducee. So the Sadducee, they wanted Israel to be like any other state, and they wanted the Torah just to be like sort of just the written Torah without the oral, not just explanation, but extrapolations and all these, it should just be the Torah will be kind of like a history. And this is what has happened. And they even got the Torah like that. It's called the Bible, and I mean, it's just a bad document. And I don't want, and it tries to reduce things down into some sort of stupid. Anyways, the main thing is that this is not what Israel is about. Israel is necessary to the Jewish people because the 613 commandments can only be done in the land of Israel. You do many of them outside of Israel, but many of them you can't do in Israel. You can't, rest the land every 7 years. Actually, it says in in the future that the laws of Israel will extend to the world, which means that every 7 years the entire world will rest. And that would be so nice. Just see how it is during the pandemic. I mean, I live in LA, man, and the skies are clear and there's no noise pollution. And I mean, it's just a machaya. It makes one alive. That's what life is supposed to be. And Israel is supposed to be, the shining light on the hill in this special place between two mountains. And it says it's like the most beautiful place of the, of the ox is between the shoulder blades. And that's what Yerushalayim, is Jerusalem. That's where it is. But this can never happen when it's been turned into politics. And, a lot of people think it was a big deal to put the American embassy in Jerusalem. I think it's a horrible idea because Jerusalem is not about politics. Not only should they not put the embassy there, but they should take the Israeli Knesset and take it to Tel Aviv. Jerusalem is a holy city, and we need to start treating, Israel and Jerusalem, the people who live in it. Now that, you've won the war, you're the most secure country in the Middle East. And, but it's not going to remain. Not that the shalom should remain, but the state cannot remain. This is not about a state. This is about the Jewish people having access to the land and that every Jewish person can live on the land. Now, it's more expensive to live in Israel than America. I mean, it's just, this is not what Israel was meant to be. This is not what Israel is going to be. And it doesn't matter who, is the leader. It only matters in politics. It certainly doesn't matter to God. And, a rabbi once asked me how it felt to live in exile. And I said, you live in a bigger exile because you're living according to the Sadducee, man. And you don't even care. You didn't have much to say after that. But so, these things have to come to resolution. And the Jewish people, when we came in to take the land from the Canaanites, we were, commanded to live with the Palestinians. The Palestinians are not our enemy. And the Palestinians are very interesting people because they're not Arab. They didn't come from Ishmael. They preceded Ishmael. And they didn't come to Jews, and they were here before Abraham, and they gave shelter to Abraham and made peace with him and made treaties with him. And we need to start abiding by those treaties. And when we abide by those treaties, the treaties is not some kind of political thing. It's not like you get this and you get that. Personally, I think that the way to peace in the Middle East is to give the Palestinians the entire Sinai, as their state. There's lots of resources in it, and plus the canal, and they have a beautiful state there. And there's all sorts of technology to help people to live in the Sinai. I've never been there, but I'm told it's like really, really beautiful. And things can settle out. I mean, it's just Rome, divide and conquer. That's what they do. That's what they're good at doing. And that's what they're doing now in our society, that everything's divide and conquer. Whatever you say, they're going to say the opposite, and whatever you think of them, they're going to think that of you, I mean, it's just fake. It's just reporting on a fake reality. And that's not their fault. They're just copying down the words and delivering to us. And some of them are just lying. What's the matter when it's all fake? What is the truth? Because it's one thing to say it's all fake, but you have to replace it with something. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you take away the answer you have to be able to replace it with another answer. And the epicenter of all this fakery is undeniably the Big Bang Theory, which proposes that life just happened out of a Big Bang. And if you let something go long enough, it's going to go alive. I mean, mathematically, it's impossible to get something out of nothing. Can divide nothing by 1,000,000, you still get nothing. You can multiply 1,000,000 by 1,000,000, you still get 1,000,000 zeros. By 0, you still get nothing. It's much more logical that nothing came out of something. The nothing of space, and once you have the nothing of space, soon as something moves, and movement is an indication of being alive, as soon as something moves, you endemically have time. Because how long did it take to get from here to there? And even time has different, the C in E equals mc squared, the constant, the speed of time, 186 miles per second, about twice our distance from the sun. And we think that's the boundary. This is the boundary. Like if you're a fish and the boundary is the the surface of the water, that's the boundary. All the fish are trying to get beyond that boundary. Maybe for a moment they jump up. Fish, they need to jump out of the water in order to kind of stabilize their ballast. That's how I understand it. Okay, if you get too much air in there, then they start tipping over. But that's their boundary. And the same, with us, our boundary is the speed of light. But that's not God's boundary. And God didn't make this world haphazardly. God made this world by engraving a dot. And in that dot is engraved all of the information needed for creation. And that was engraved into the Or Ein Sof, into the illumination of God before there was creation, and made a space, nothing out of something. And in that space was engraved all this information, which when you engrave something, you do it circularly. And that started this whirlpool that took on heaviness and eventually burst into color, which is the black hole, which gave then birth to the stars. And everything connected to God's original desire, which was to be known and low, which that is the human being. After all these generations, there's no question, we are low. We are just destroying our earth. I don't know if anyone is so low like that. I mean, the white man came to this continent and just I don't know the word for how vilely they treated the American Indians, how much they thought they were savages. But the Native Americans were, they have like this tradition of like 7 generations. Whatever they do to the earth, they should be able to look 7 generations ahead and say, well, ahead. And the white man just came and just destroyed everything, destroyed the sensitivity to the land, destroyed all the ancient ways, and brought instead Christianity, man, and with their Bible. And this whole thing, that just as the Big Bang is the epicenter of all fakery in our understanding of reality, so too is Catholicism, the epicenter of this horrible lie that the Jews killed God, who was also a Jew. Besides Jews, they act like they're God, but Jews aren't God, man. Only God is God. God's not physical. God's not spiritual. And the sign of a cross is the sign of Mars, which Rome prays to. I mean, this is the Roman God. And it's very important that this should be really wiped out from the world. Not through, no one has to get violent or anything. I mean, just make them pay their taxes on all the property that they own, and they'll all go out of business. In the first bailout of for the pandemic, the Catholic Church got $1.5 billion as a small business. And no one ever, everyone was just, yeah, that's fine. It's like paying your dues to Rome. And we have to wake up to really what we're living in, which is a complete just distortion of what reality is. And instead, we should see the lens through the tree of life. You don't need everyone's in the form of the tree of life. And if we can understand, the way the tree of life functions, we can understand how the human being functions. For example, that the right side of the brain is where the soul comes in. And this is called chokhmah, koach, the power of what? That's where the intellect is able to go what? To form a question. And that question is like a cup, and it's ready to be filled with water. And the light of the soul comes down to such a degree, it is contracted and attenuated until it becomes like water coming into the brain. But even like that, the brain sees it as fire and goes, what's that? But it gets it. Doesn't know what it got. It's like when you see something, but you don't really know what you have seen. So with that, it takes and gives it to the left side of the brain. This is called father and mother. And where the right side of the brain is full of vision, the left side of the brain is full of hearing. And everything is incremental, and they go back and forth. As we know, that's how the brain works. I mean, it's like an integrated thing, like the mother and father is integrated inside the person. You don't have your mother talking, your father talking. I mean, you got, everything is integrated. And eventually it gives birth to the third eye. And this is really true in our solar system, where the sun is bursting with this light. We don't actually know how big the sun is. It might be like, Pluto or something, but it's connected to a very bright source and is giving off this illumination. And then Mercury is the only planet. There's no separation between it and the sun. It doesn't have a moon. And it has this very intimate relationship with the sun. And then Venus is the brightest star in the sky, even though it's not the largest, but it's close to the sun, and it gives us this enormous brilliance, and that's the third eye. And the right arm, is like the kind side, and that's blue. That's the earth. And the left arm is the severe side. That's red. That's Mars. And the body is the biggest, and that's Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest of the 9 planets. And then you have the very big planets of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, which are the legs and the sex, and finally Pluto, which is speech. And because of that, Pluto has 5 moons, because there's 5 not attributes, but 5 mechanisms of speech: the throat, the palate, the tongue, the teeth, and the lips. And that's why they have these elliptical things going way out, because they're our speech into the universe. So there you got it. Thank you for watching me, listening to me. It's so much easier to do this when you know that someone in real time is actually sort of there with you. It's pretty cool. Let me remind you of my my book, Sex, a Metaphor to History. Trump 7-7 and the 1,000 Years of Woman. It explains how the line of time can be transformed into a spiral, and where we are on the spiral. And all of that gives us great faith in the future, no matter who's, leading who. God's leading us all. This is God's world. No one can fuck up God's world. I mean, we can to a degree, but we can't stop what's going to happen. What's going to happen is we're going into 1,000 years of woman and 1,000 years of peace. And now in these last 220 years, man has to stand up and show that he's learned to be a man. And in the Garden of Eden, when God said, "Why did you eat from the fruit?" he said, the woman gave it to me. And now man has to stand up and say, we did this. We destroyed, the earth. We fouled the water. We poisoned the air, and we got a bunch of junk up in outer space. We did it. And we have to rectify it. And we have to be a good man, and we have to put woman above ourselves. It means putting certainly Mother Earth above outer space. So, and this is all going to happen. The only question is, what part do you want to play? We're all here. We're all part of the story. And the question is, what part do you want to play? So one part you can play is read my book, review my book. This is just really new information. And I don't like social networking in general is very difficult for me. So I just really, I can only rely upon people who think this is important information to, pass it along, send someone my book. I don't know. I don't know. But we all want to, play a part, because the main thing after life is we don't want to be embarrassed. You had an opportunity to do something, but you said, I'll just watch it on TV. So you missed your opportunity. Just the last thing I'll say is, there's 2 types of commandments. There's a positive commandment, do something good. Inside, there's a guy there begging for money, and you can do something good, but you walk by. So that's like, like you numbed a part of your body. To a certain degree, your hand became numb, because you had an opportunity to do something good and you didn't. On the other hand, if you do something bad, which you shouldn't be doing, so that's like making a cut in the flesh and the blood starts draining out. So these are 2 types of ways of being weak, of being numb or of just losing one's life energy. And the way, to get it back is to, acknowledge that God is here, God created the world, and to the best of our ability, we want to do what's good in the eyes of God. All right. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you tomorrow for another 420.